Congratulations on yet another successful project.
Thank you.
This is such a unique film in the sense that it was all essentially shot in one location over, what is it, like 12 days?
12 shooting days,
What was that experience like?
You know, it was terrifying. Well, because it was Shakespeare. It was actually my first experience with Shakespeare, so, you know, initially I was terrified. The 12-day time frame is crazy. It's crazy for anything. But we had so much rehearsal time beforehand, and it was all done in Joss's house. So we just sort of had the full run of the house, you know. So we rehearsed each scene, I mean, pretty much until we all felt comfortable and we were in the space where we were going to shoot. Sometimes when you're shooting a film, you show up and you've got to like learn the set and learn, you know, the spaces and the ins and outs of the environment before you can even, you know, start rolling. So we were, you know, we were super aware of what we were going to do. So the day that we showed up to, you know, to shoot the scenes, it was pretty familiar. But it's not a lot of time. And that was our, you know, our first note from Joss was, don't, you know your words. We don't have time. There's very little room for error. You know, he's going to set up, you know, do 3 setups or maybe have like 1 or 2 goes at the scene. But, you know, again, as terrifying as it was so exhilarating because it was essentially he was shooting live theater. So it was like, you know, the high that you get from being on stage when you don't know what's going to happen is sort of, you know, what he shot. So.
And were you at all familiar with the original Shakespeare version before you started working on this project?
Yeah, I mean, he didn't change any of the text, so I knew the play. Like, I had read it. It had been a while since I had read it, and I had not seen the Kenneth Branagh version. So I was remotely familiar with it, but again, it had been a while.
Okay, and you played Don John,
Don
who's
John,
the villain in the story.
Yes.
How much fun was it to play the bad guy?
It was so much fun. I've actually, it was the first time I've been the villain, or been a villain, regardless of, but it was so much fun because I loved, you know, he wasn't just sort of like, you know, just plain mean. He was manipulating, and he was just complex in his, you know, seemingly earnest nature when he's just screwing you over. And I just loved just, you know, sort of having fun with him because he was such a sort of an intellectual spirit and coming at his victims from almost a playful way. You know, that was a lot of fun for me.
And is it true Joss asked you all to kind of keep it under wraps until it was finally ready to be unveiled?
Yes.
Was that really hard to do?
No, I mean, everybody asks us that. He just said no, don't do it. So we all love him, we respect him immensely, and have the utmost loyalty to him. So, you know, if he asks us not to talk about it, we just simply didn't talk about it. But that when the film was announced and I was doing press, that was the first question out of everybody's mouth, and they were like, "How in the world did you keep it a secret?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like, sometimes my friends tell me when they're pregnant, and I don't tell anybody." It's like, you know, it's the same thing. Like, if somebody tells you something and they want you to, you know, keep it under wraps until they're ready to announce it, it's pretty much the same thing.
And what was it like being back on set with all the old gang from Firefly, from Serenity?
Yeah.
Was it all just one big party on set?
Yeah, you know, it was a lot of fun. It's, you know, it speaks volumes to Joss. There's like this huge party scene in the play, or in the movie, and I remember I was in his backyard and I was just looking around. It's just packed, like wall to wall, people. And I was like, only Joss Whedon, really only Joss Whedon could. Everyone there was a friend. Everyone there came to support him in this passion project, you know, especially the principal actors. You know, when I say, Joss says to us, know your words, know your, you know, show up ready to work. It was just, everybody brought their A game. Everyone, you know, came with 150%. It was really wonderful. I mean, it just speaks volumes to him, as this was something that was so important to him. And you just have like basically an army of people who show up and say, I want to help you do this. So it really was. I mean, the energy in that environment was extraordinary.
What do you think, in your opinion, it is about Joss Whedon that just draws everyone back in so quickly?
I mean, first of all, he's equally as loyal to us as we are to him, and I think he just continues to invite. You know, I think there's I always said about him, you know, when I first met him, when I was first, you know, being asked questions about him, he was the most accessible writer, director, producer I had ever worked with. Sometimes you would forget that he was the boss. It was like, especially Firefly, you know, it was like when I was working on Firefly, and you know, he would come running from the writer's room, and he had just broken a story, and he would just, you know, like a little kid, he'd be like, oh, guess what? And, you know, he would tell a story, and he would sit down, and he would just, like, you know, grab some food from the, you know, craft service table, and he was just like a friend. Like, he was a buddy, you know, he's a dear friend, he's a mentor, he's just someone that you want to do right by, someone who's so inspiring to be around. I mean, especially Much Ado, it was infectious, his excitement. So I think when you meet somebody who's, you know, such a cliche, but he is a genius, so he's got these wonderful ideas, and, you know, and he can execute them. He's, you know, one of these people in Hollywood who can say, guess what, I'm going to go this, you know, I just want to do this movie, and I'm just going to throw it together, and you're like, yes, like, I'm going to come do it with you, and then I feel just honored to have been asked, you know.
So when it comes down to it, this is still a classic Shakespeare story.
Yes.
And we know it obviously isn't always easy to get the younger audiences running to watch a Shakespeare movie.
Yeah.
But what is different about this version, about Joss Whedon's version, that makes it so appealing?
You know, well, first of all, it's shot all in black and white, so it's got this wonderful look about it. He did not touch any of the text, you know, so it is the play. I think it's one of the most timeless of Shakespeare's plays, and specifically comedy. So there's no iambic pentameter. I think what he did with us was sort of, you know, bring it in. He specifically didn't want it to be Shakespeare. He wanted it to be intimate and natural. You know, we all wore our own clothes, so sort of like a contemporary take on it. And there's, you know, just a few Joss-isms that we'll find. So yeah, we'll see.
And you yourself have done a pretty good mix of film and television.
Yes.
Do you prefer one over the other?
You know, I don't. I think for me it comes down to the story and the script and the role. You know, whether it be, and especially with Joss, it's almost like, you know, I've done TV and film with him, and it's never really different for him either. I noticed that working with him. I never feel like, oh, I'm shooting a movie. It's actually, I'm here telling a story. Okay.
And what do you think you'd be doing if you weren't acting?
Oh,
What
a great question. A doctor in space? Oh gosh. They're kind of the same thing, photography and journalism.
Okay, very cool.
Yeah.
Neat. And you also have a new movie coming up, Best Friends Forever.
Oh, right. Just forgot about that in my last interview. They're like, what are you up to? I'm like, what to do? Totally forgot.
Can you tell us a bit about what we can expect from that?
Yeah, you know, it's, oh gosh. It's an interesting, I'm trying to think. It's like a apocalyptic Thelma and Louise. So it's two friends of mine wrote it. They had approached me about a role that they wrote for me. You know, I'm in it not too much. It's definitely the story about the women, but there's sort of this impending, you know, apocalypse that they're unaware of, and they're sort of on this road trip. So it's a take on you know, a great story about friendship and life, and these two girls' lives in the midst of sort of a disaster.
Oh, it definitely sounds interesting.
Yeah, it's good.
Well, thank you so much for
Thank
talking to us
you.
today.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
an absolute pleasure.
You too.
We actually have a little thank you gift here.
Oh my goodness.
There's some really exciting goodies inside, so make sure you take a good look at that.
Wow.
And enjoy. You can take it on all your travels.
That is a great. That's a great little suitcase.
Thank you.
No problem.
Appreciate it.